Okay, let's unpack this. Tonight, we're cracking open a document that feels less like a historical record and more like an instruction manual.
Yeah, an instruction manual written by this
Yeah,
benevolent, slightly witty universal force.
exactly. We are diving into material that is, I mean, it's complex, it's reality bending, but it's delivered with such surprising clarity and, frankly, a lot of humor.
It really is.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the human drama that was going on around the session itself.
Oh, for sure. We'll get to that.
This is, the perfect deep dive for anyone who senses deep down that their physical world isn't quite the solid, objective structure they were taught it was.
Right.
We're going way beyond just philosophy here. We're connecting the dots between, say, your most chaotic internal emotions and the literal atomic structures of the chair you're sitting on.
Proving that one is basically the blueprint for the other.
Precisely.
So, for everyone listening, we are embarking on session 66 of the early sessions, book 2 of the Seth Material. This session was recorded on June 29th, 1964. It was a Monday, 9 p.m., and it is a powerhouse of metaphysical instruction.
It is. And we want to acknowledge the profound depth and just the scope of this work. We absolutely have to credit the Seth Material and the publisher, New Awareness Network, for making all this available to the world.
Of course.
And if this discussion sparks your curiosity, and we pretty much guarantee it will, we strongly encourage you to study the complete Seth Material books.
And visit the New Awareness Network website, right?
Yeah, in the bookstore at sethcenter.com/way-early sessions. It's all there.
And just for clarity, this deep dive, it's distributed free of charge on all major platforms. It's for educational purposes. We just want to share the knowledge.
So what's the core thematic thread here? I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
we are looking at the fundamental governing principles, what Seth calls the psychic laws, that dictate existence itself.
Psychic laws, I like that.
This session establishes this undeniable, really radical link between your inner psychological state and the literal creation of your physical environment, what we call matter.
So this isn't just, a positive attitude will make your life better. This is your psychological state is literally generating the physical components of your life.
That's it, exactly. The central question this session forces you to confront is, well, it's truly radical.
Yeah.
What if the division between you, the self, your consciousness, and the world, the environment, objective reality, what if that's just an artificial, temporary necessity?
A necessity for what?
For learning.
Yeah.
For a very, very focused kind of training. And then there's the second part.
Go on.
What if every single object you see, including the device you're listening on right now, exists simultaneously in multiple unique realities, all overlapping at a single invisible focal point?
Oh.
That's where we're headed in this deep dive.
That is some heavy lifting for a Monday night session in 1964,
Yeah.
especially considering the conditions under which it was delivered. I mean, before we get into the metaphysics, we have to talk about the extremely turbulent pipeline, right?
The high-energy logistical hurdles of the moment. Yes.
The environment before session 66 was anything but calm. The source material starts by noting that the medium, Ruburt, that's Jane Roberts, was in a truly tempestuous emotional state.
You really have to appreciate the human drama of it all. They were in the middle of house hunting. Jane was dealing with the stress of running her art gallery.
Right. Her father had just arrived for a visit.
And the real estate man had been visiting the house. It was just a pressure cooker of external and internal demands.
A total pressure cooker.
And Seth, being the, insightful observer he is, he acknowledges the intensity, but handles it with his completely relaxed, almost funny detachment. He knows. Rubert's mood is truly tempestuous.
And then the best line.
I am glad I do not work at his art gallery. I am glad I am not director there.
I love that quote. It just instantly sets the tone. It's like even the most profound metaphysical guide can still crack a joke about office politics.
Totally. It grounds the entire session in a very relatable way.
It does, but the humor quickly gives way to some serious analysis. Seth points out that despite all the turbulence, Ruburt was now more honest with himself.
Right, compared to his younger years when he would just internalize and hide his frustration.
So Seth saw this emotional discharge, messy as it was, as a sign of good direction.
So the chaos wasn't a setback. It was a symptom of growth, an intense clearing of the pipes, so to speak.
But Seth was still worried. He said he was not sure if I can get through clearly this evening with further material on the nature of matter through Rubert's turbulent mazes.
He even considered giving them time off. which is fascinating because it confirms that the human vessel's psychological state directly impacts the clarity and energy available for the transmission.
This isn't just a mental exercise, it's an energetic one.
And they decide to push through, and, well, we're the beneficiaries of that choice.
That whole turbulent mood really sets the stage for a few interesting open threads that pop up in the session log. First, there's a quick mention of a name, Thomas Voller. He was picked up on the Ouija board recently. The board claimed he died in 1894.
And the detail here, which is so easy to miss, is Seth's response when they ask about him. Seth refers to Thomas Vogler in the present tense.
He says, "Who is who? I do not know who he is."
Who he is, not who he was. That small choice of words, using the present tense for someone who supposedly died decades ago, it just immediately reinforces the whole premise that consciousness persists beyond physical death.
The past tense of death in this context is just irrelevant. The consciousness exists, whether or not Seth knows who he is from his perspective.
Exactly. And speaking of ongoing projects, there's the nod to the writers to Joseph's long-term experiments with psychological time, or psi time.
Yeah, he'd been keeping detailed records and sketches of his experiences, or lack thereof. He even noted he had no results trying that very day.
You can feel the frustration of the student waiting for the next lesson.
Totally.
The anticipation is enormous. And Seth confirms they're building towards something big. He tells them their records will have a tendency to fall into certain types of pattern, and you will have various examples of each type.
And then he says, "We will go into them all in detail, but they will also be grouped."
It's a promise of a massive future reveal. And it implies that this whole discussion we're having now about matter construction, it's the necessary foundation for that future talk.
But before we get deep into universal physics, we have to talk about the physical reality check that happened during the break.
Willy the cat.
Willy the cat.
Oh, Willy, the quintessential domestic interrupter, reminding us that no matter how elevated your focus is, you are still sharing a plane with a creature focused entirely on ankles.
Right. So Willy had been mostly peaceful during the first half of the session, but just before the break ended, the notes say he became quite active chasing bugs.
Which is fine. That's just a cat being a cat.
But the moment Jane began dictating the complex second half, the stakes, they got higher. Willy decided his true purpose in that moment was to destabilize the trance state.
He dove for her ankles and began nipping at them none too gently.
I just pictured Jane, eyes closed, voice monotone, delivering these cosmic secrets while a cat is actively trying to take out her Achilles tendon.
The cognitive dissonance must have been huge.
And the detail that just brings it to life is that Jane, or Ruburt, without missing a single beat or interrupting her delivery,
Picked him up and deposited him in another room.
it's the perfect visual. It's this total focus required by the trance state versus the, let's say, the alternative focus of the domestic animal.
It's a wonderful, relatable moment. It just shows that the environment is often turbulent, even when the inner work is precise.
It sets the perfect stage because that whole incident, the cat drama, the turbulence, that is the exact kind of high-energy, chaotic environment that the next section says we are actively constructing.
Let's shift from the cat drama to the core instruction that defines this entire universe.
You are your own architect.
This is the fundamental keystone concept delivered in Session 66. It's the non-negotiable principle of existence on our plane. Seth says, the keystone here is that you are only aware of your own constructions. This is most important.
Let's just stop right there for a second. That is a radical claim. It completely flips the script from I perceive the objective world to I perceive the subjective world that I myself have built.
Exactly. You truly construct your own environment, and it in turn then has its influence upon you. The environment is literally an extension of the self, a materialized feedback mechanism.
We just assume there's an external shared table that exists whether or not we look at it.
But Seth is saying the table you see is your highly personalized construction, focused and stabilized by your energy.
Okay, so why the illusion of separateness? If I built the chair I'm sitting on, why can't I just decide right now to change its color to purple? Why is there a time lag?
That's where the artificial divide comes in. And this answers your question perfectly. Seth explains that the division between the subject, the self, the creator, and the object, the environment, the not-self, is an artificial but necessary development on our plane.
Necessary for what?
It's required for the training and the manipulation of energy, which is required there. Think of this physical life as an intense, advanced training simulation.
Okay.
To master the art of energy projection, you need a high-contrast environment. You need to focus your powerful creative energy along highly defined lines, developing the ability to project your inner purpose outward into a seemingly solid, stable reality.
So the division is like a training wheel, or maybe a limiting filter.
It's a limiting filter that enables focus. Seth notes that because of this intense focus on physical construction, mankind has not used other abilities to any great degree.
And earlier in our history, he could not afford to.
Right. Our survival depended on mastering this one specific skill, turning thought into solid matter. But as we move through different eras, different training cycles, that necessity for such a narrow focus is changing.
So if the environment down to the chair is a construction, what are the building codes? What are these psychic laws that govern this whole reality generation process?
This is where we shift from philosophy to the genuine mechanics of it all, the metaphysical physics. Seth lists 3 abilities required to convert an idea, which is pure energy, into physical matter.
These are the psychic laws of construction.
They are.
Let's break those 3 down, because this is the operational instruction manual for you, the listener.
The first law involves the individual's ability in the projection of idea into matter. This is the blueprint stage. You are projecting a thought form and giving it that initial energetic push toward physical existence. The clarity and intensity of that idea matter immensely.
Okay, and the second law?
The second is the ability to receive and transmit energy. This is the fuel tank and the pipeline. The prime factor here is the individual's ability to avail himself of energy and then to utilize it effectively.
So matter creation takes consistent energy. If your energy supply is low, or if the transmission pipeline is clogged, the construction will be weak.
That's right. And I think this is where the inner ego versus the outer ego comes in, right? If I consciously want success, but internally I am terrified of responsibility, that's a clog in the pipeline.
Precisely. And that leads to the third law, the actual physical construction itself.
Yeah.
This is governed by the second critical factor, coordination and communication between the inner and outer ego.
The outer ego being the conscious mind dealing with the physical world.
And the inner ego is the vast multidimensional self, the true repository of energy and purpose.
So if those two aren't synchronized, the construction is faulty.
It sounds like psychological health is literally structural integrity.
That is the perfect summary of it. A poor connection, a lack of synchronization. It means the conscious self is using the inner self's energy stores for a project that the deeper intuitive self fundamentally disagrees with. You end up with a confused, contradictory blueprint.
And if the blueprint is confused, the construction is faulty. This leads us directly to the consequence that I think hits everyone the hardest. How our physical body itself is psychological testimony.
This is the direct, inescapable result of the construction principle. Seth states unequivocally that illness is not a random external assault. It's a structural flaw projected by the self due to internal conflict.
He uses the specific examples of gallstones or kidney stones,
which he describes as adverse constructions projected by the individual because of psychological imbalance. That is, a confusion of inner purpose.
Okay, that's a radical and potentially challenging idea for our listeners. If a small child gets sick, is Seth saying the child created that illness? How do we approach that without it sounding like, blaming the victim?
It's crucial we understand Seth's context here. It's not about blame, it's about mechanism. Consciousness is always constructing. And Seth suggests that a child's construction is still based on their unique inner purpose, which is often entangled with the high-energy psychological fields of their parents or guardians.
So it's never random.
Never random. It simply highlights the power of consciousness at every age.
So what does a confusion of inner purpose actually look like in daily life, if it's powerful enough to manifest gallstones?
It's often a deep-seated contradiction. Imagine the conscious self, the outer ego, believing it has to be a constantly busy, constantly achieving perfection, always striving.
Sounds familiar.
But the inner ego knows the self desperately needs rest, creativity, and self-acceptance. The physical construction then manifests the conflict, perhaps through painful internal blockages, as a desperate, materialized attempt to force the outer ego to stop and address the inner need.
The construction is adverse because it comes from conflicting signals, not a harmonious purpose.
Exactly. It reframes disease entirely. It's not punishment. It's a physical manifestation of a psychological negotiation that failed internally.
Which means conversely.
The healthy physical body, therefore, is eloquent testimony of inner balance. And the path to recovery from any adverse construction requires more than just external physical treatment. The inner cause has to be uncovered, not only uncovered intellectually, but understood intuitively if recovery is to take place.
It requires that vital coordination we talked about. The outer ego must listen to and harmonize with the inner ego to resolve the fundamental confusion.
And this idea of inner purpose extends far beyond just one lifetime, too.
Absolutely. The individual creates their environment not just day to day, but through successive incarnations. This creates what Seth calls a strong thread of continuity purpose in all his constructions.
We're not just building our bedroom, we're molding history. On a grander scale, in terms of continuity on our plane, our individual psychological purpose is literally the heart of the matter.
So, the recurring themes in my life, the kinds of jobs I take, the challenges I repeatedly face, the types of relationships I attract, those are all constructions based on a persistent, long-term inner purpose that my soul is trying to work out across lifetimes.
Yes, your outer environment is the material record of that continuity purpose. If you keep constructing similar lessons, it just means the inner conflict hasn't been intuitively understood yet.
And this individual construction doesn't happen in isolation, which brings us to the fascinating concept of energetic support and cooperation between consciousnesses.
We are not just lone architects in separate bubbles.
No, we are constantly exchanging energy. Seth uses the example of the dog's illness, which had been an unfortunate occurrence mentioned previously.
The dog created and maintained its own construction, its own physical body, but the humans around it only saw their own construction, their perspective of the dog.
So the dog's consciousness was creating the dog's reality. Why did the dog require energetic support from the humans around it?
This is a crucial point about the hierarchy of consciousnesses and energy flow. Seth explains that the dog, for reasons he promises to elaborate on later, did not have your capacity for drawing upon energy. So while the dog was maintaining its own construction, it couldn't project its stability past a certain point without help from the human's psychic stores of energy.
So through its inner senses, the dog was literally sensing and drawing upon the human's energetic support.
Literally. So a weak construction ability comes from a weak ability to draw upon that universal energy. And the energy of other consciousnesses can be channeled to bolster that weakness.
And this establishes the general universal principle.
All consciousnesses exchange energy back and forth, and a great cooperation exists here. Weak construction, whether it manifests as poor health, chronic bad luck, or a perpetually shabby environment, ultimately stems from a weak ability to draw upon energy from the source.
It's an issue of supply and transmission, not just a matter of thought alone.
That is highly detailed physics. And Seth adds that the atoms and molecules themselves only have a generalized consciousness. They lack strong organizational tendencies.
So they need our specific, focused individual energy to organize them into a stable glass, or a healthy body, or a well-constructed room.
That's right. If the individual's energy draw is weak or inconsistent, the material construction will be shoddy. And the amazing part is that while the outer physical senses never perceive the shoddy construction, the glass looks normal to the eye, the inner senses register the underlying instability immediately.
And that's how inner communication begins.
That's the transition point we need. We've established we construct our bodies and environment even across lifetimes, and that we exchange energy. But Seth goes further and says we build things we can't see.
How does a pure thought, an idea, gain atomic structure and become a non-physical construction?
We have to move beyond visible matter now. Seth is very clear. Besides the obvious constructions we perceive as matter, we also form or project constructions of a different sort, which you do not perceive on a conscious level.
We tend to think of an idea as this vaporous, ephemeral thing, a disembodied non-entity.
And Seth explicitly refutes that. He emphasizes that these ideas are not a disembodied non-entity absolute, but composed of energy to begin with. They exist with a specific atomic structure, but one that possesses different densities and speeds than our physical matter.
Which is why our physical senses can't pick them up.
So an idea is matter, just operating on a frequency or density that's outside the range of the physical eye.
Exactly. These non-physical constructions are perceived by the inner senses and utilized by the subconscious and inner self as a very important reality. This is the reality of the inner planes.
Can you give us an example of where this construction exists?
The dream world is a classic example. Seth mentions that the plane given to the dream world also represents actual constructions with which your conscious mind is not usually familiar.
These are not vague, formless half-realities.
No. Their existence, their structure, their laws are as real and consistent as those of our physical world, just experienced on a different level of density.
That is remarkable. It means that when I have a powerful idea, I am literally building something on another plane. But what happens if that idea is totally impractical for our current physical plane? Say I want to construct a starship out of old socks and duct tape.
That energy doesn't just vanish or float away. All energy and all ideas are constructed in one way or another because energy, by its very nature, is always organizing itself.
Those ideas which are impractical to construct physically, either for psychological or psychic reasons, like the starship made of socks, or maybe an idea that conflicts too heavily with the collective construction.
Or channeled into construction on other planes or levels.
That's the cosmic recycling program. The energy is never lost. It just materializes in a different dimension.
Precisely. The characteristics of the reality it creates simply differ from the reality of physical construction.
And for the purpose of the discussion, Seth offered a necessary terminology clarification for the hosts, which really helps us navigate this gap between the planes.
Yes, the distinction between the physical processor and the intangible source.
To avoid confusion, they decided to arbitrarily use brain for the physical construction, the physical component in your skull, and mind as the intangible, the organizing principle.
The physical brain, being matter, cannot sense the inner planes directly.
But the intangible mind deals with them constantly, channeling energy and receiving the transmissions from those other levels. The conscious mind is essentially the physical construction's interface, focused primarily on physical construction, often unaware of these deeper realities.
I find it intensely interesting that ideas, once they're given energy, they attain a vitality of their own. They become active entities independent of the original thinker.
That is a crucial point, and it's the bridge to the confirmation we'll discuss later. Ideas are communicated telepathically through the subconscious. But Seth specifies that they don't require a direct, intentional communication between two conscious minds.
They exist and broadcast independently once they achieve a certain energy threshold, waiting to be picked up by any sensitive receiver.
They become like radio waves, originating from a source, the individual, but existing in the air for anyone to tune into.
That's where it gets really interesting. If my ideas have a vitality of their own and my consciousness is constructing my reality, what happens when two consciousnesses look at the exact same physical thing?
This is the final and most profound teaching of the session, the amazing world of overlapping glasses. This moves us past psychological construction and into the true nature of dimension and reality continuum.
The radical concept here is that unseen universes and planes are constantly interacting with and aiding your own reality, and the definition of those realities begins with your own perspective.
It requires a total paradigm shift. To make this concept tangible, Jane picked up an empty glass on the table and Seth used it to conduct a thought experiment that truly shatters the notion of objective reality.
We need to walk through this analogy very slowly. We assume a single objective glass exists, shared equally by everyone.
Seth states that if 5 people stand observing that glass, you do not have one shared glass. You have 5 different glasses, not one.
Okay, 5 different perspectives is easy to accept, but
Yeah.
5 different glasses. That implies 5 different sets of atoms.
Precisely. Each observer simultaneously creates 3 unique aspects of reality. First, a physical construction, the glass itself.
Okay.
Second, their own personal perspective on that glass.
Yeah.
And third, their own unique space continuum in which that specific constructed glass exists.
Let me make sure I understand the magnitude of this. If I'm looking at the glass I see is composed of atoms that I organize using my energy and inner purpose.
Right.
And it exists in my space-time environment. The person next to me is looking at their glass, composed of atoms they organized, existing in their space-time environment.
And you are both completely unaware of the other 4 glasses and the 4 other space continuums?
That is the paradox of our physical training module. Each individual is completely unaware of the other perspectives, even though all 5 physical glasses exist simultaneously.
If 10 people observe, you have 10 space continuums and 10 actual unique glasses existing right here, overlapping with your own.
So what we call shared reality is simply the most dominant construction, the highest common denominator that we collectively agree upon for the sake of our training module.
The agreed upon filter, the focal mechanism.
Yeah.
But there is a crucial point where all 5 or all 10 perspectives overlap. Seth calls this the focal point.
If that point is the common ground, it must be the key to understanding the full scope of existence.
It is the ultimate unifying factor. Seth explains that if one could find this one focal point, they could glimpse and barely glimpse the other 4 using deduction from the point of overlapping.
You aren't seeing the full construction of the other glass, but you can deduce its existence and form based on the point where your realities intersect.
The implication for universal mechanics is huge. This point of overlap is key in all universes and all planes, not just the physical one we're in now.
It connects everything.
It does. Seth notes that this overlap point is a basic factor in travel, though not physical travel in the conventional sense of our current universe. This is how consciousness navigates dimensional space. And significantly, he states that his communication itself, coming through Jane Ruburt, involves his use of such an overlapping point. He's briefly touching the focal point, where multiple realities intersect to deliver the data to our plane.
That makes so much sense. The intensity and clarity of the trance state are necessary to find and maintain that sliver of intersection, that focal point, to transmit the data. And then the biggest application of all.
The high-stakes transition we call death.
The session links this directly to the experience of transition. Death on your plane is described as, among other things, an arrival at such a point of overlap.
If the end of physical life is arriving at this nodal point where all perspectives meet, it explains how consciousness can transition seamlessly into a broader reality.
You don't have to go find a new universe. You just shed the physical filter that was making you focus on only your one constructed glass.
You arrive at the junction where you are instantly aware of the 10 or infinite glasses you previously filtered out.
Exactly. It's not an ending. It's a sudden, complete widening of focus into the broader reality that the consciousness itself constructed, but one that was previously filtered out to allow for focused training.
This is why Seth was truly amazed he got through so well on this last material, given Rubert's earlier tempestuous mood. It shows that the inner self, when focused, can temporarily override the noise of the outer ego to access these profound, fundamental truths.
That is a staggering amount of information to process, moving from the physics of a chair to the mechanics of death.
But the best part of the session is how Seth immediately brings this abstract theory crashing back down to observable reality by analyzing the personal experiences of the writer.
Speaking of confirmation, we can bring this conversation full circle by looking at the psychotime experiments that Joseph had been tracking. Seth's construction theory, the vitality of ideas, the communication between inner and outer ego, it immediately explains these recent synchronistic events that Joseph had recorded as just mundane notes.
Let's start with the visual experience Joseph had on Tuesday, June 30th, the day after the session. He was trying sight time, trying to get results, and he had a brief glimpse from directly overhead of two men descending into an outside cellarway attached to a house.
They wore hats, and he thought they might be property inspectors.
This aligns perfectly with the current high-energy emotional flux in their lives. House hunting. Property acquisition is a massive commitment of purpose and energy.
So Joseph's inner senses were picking up external reality flux related to this major construction project. The inner self was confirming visually that the topic of house and inspection was active in their broader reality.
It's not a random hallucination. It's the inner self reporting on an external construction that the outer ego is deeply invested in. But the next one, the smiling landlord, that's the true proof of inner knowledge preceding external fact.
Indeed. On Wednesday, July 1st, Joseph induced the desired state and had two key experiences. First, he saw the smiling face of the landlord, James Spaziani, and heard an auditory message that he immediately forgot.
Why is this such a crucial synchronicity?
Because of the factual note provided later. The landlord, James Spaziani, had already secretly viewed the house they were interested in on Sunday night, unknown to Joseph and Jane.
So Joseph's inner senses picked up the landlord's positive involvement, the smiling face, and the forgotten auditory message, proving an inner connection to external, established facts that the conscious mind hadn't received through the mail or a phone call yet.
The energy signature of the landlord's involvement was already in the air, and Joseph's mind tuned into it.
The inner self is clearly not bound by physical time or conventional communication methods. But the strongest evidence, the capstone of this entire session, is the "it's coffee time" telepathic incident.
This is the definitive proof supporting Seth's point that ideas attain their own vitality and are picked up by the subconscious telepathically without needing direct intent from the sender.
So Joseph, while in his psychological state, heard an unidentified female voice offstage to his right say, "It's coffee time."
And here is the narrative kicker that makes this section so phenomenal. The source material confirms that at that precise moment, Jane, or Ruburt, was sitting quietly in the living room, separated from Joseph by two closed doors.
She had had an incredibly busy and upsetting day at the gallery and had missed her usual coffee break.
While sitting on the couch, she wasn't talking or consciously trying to contact Joseph. She was simply sitting there and had a single, powerful, vehement thought about missing her coffee break. She thought it with some vehemence.
That vehemence is the key, isn't it? It's the energy that turned the simple idea into a self-sustaining thought form, a construction on the inner plane, which was powerful enough to be picked up instantly by Joseph's subconscious.
Even through multiple physical barriers.
Absolutely. The idea, driven by emotional intensity, attained enough vitality to broadcast itself. Joseph's subconscious, being the receiver that deals with these inner constructions, tuned in.
It wasn't a direct message from Jane saying, "I need coffee."
No, it was receiving the energetic broadcast of an idea that had become a minor construction of its own. It brings all the abstract theory of construction and energy exchange crashing down into the most brilliant, domestic, observable reality.
It's truly brilliant confirmation. And Seth wraps up session 66 with two pieces of personal constructive advice that also tie back perfectly to the metaphysics.
First, he notes that the glass discussion, the idea of overlapping multi-perspective realities, might be evocative for Joseph's painting, suggesting a direct artistic application of the profound theories discussed.
That's the ultimate creative advice. If your perspective is one of 10 simultaneous perspectives, how do you paint that overlap? How do you visually convey the focal point that connects them all? It's a challenge to push art beyond conventional limitations.
And finally, a simple but practical suggestion to help with the collective stress and the turbulent moods. Camping some weekends, if manageable, will be most beneficial to them both and refresh their artistic abilities.
A physical vacation to support their inner creative purposes and harmonize the inner and outer ego. It's a beautiful synthesis of the physical and the metaphysical.
The prescription for better construction is sometimes simply fresh air and a change of physical environment.
So what does this all mean? We started with Ruburt's tempestuous mood and ended with telepathic coffee orders and 10 simultaneous glasses. The overwhelming feeling of this session is that your personal drama is never separate from cosmic creation.
Right.
Our main takeaway is the stunning reality of our fundamental creative power, which governs our health, our environment, and even unseen dimensions.
It confirms that the reality you inhabit, the single glass you perceive, is merely a specific, highly filtered perspective, constructed by your consciousness for the purpose of focused energy manipulation and learning.
The existence of these overlap points implies a universe absolutely teeming with countless realities that you are currently filtering out.
Your limited conscious self is performing a massive service simply by ignoring 90% of what's actually there, just so you can focus on building a stable table or a healthy body.
That is a phenomenal thought, and it leads us to our final provocative question for you, the listener. If your psychological purpose molds history and even the atoms around you through successive incarnations, what small construction, be it a self-imposed limitation, a perpetual financial struggle, or a lingering minor illness based on an inner psychological imbalance or confusion of purpose, are you maintaining right now without realizing it?
The session encourages you to go deeper than the intellectual understanding and seek the intuitive answer, the cause that requires inner balance and coordination of the ego to resolve.
A wonderful challenge for our listeners to take into their week. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the physics of psychological purpose. If you want to explore the full depth of this material, please visit sethcenter.com/the You Early Sessions to study Session 66 and the complete works of the early sessions.
Until next time, keep exploring the glass and all the continuums it contains.
Good evening.